Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And we're not going to give you a daily dose of Dismal Disney. We're actually going to talk about comics. We're going to talk about the comic book industry. We're going to talk about Webtoon. We're going to talk about digital comics. And the reason we're doing this video is we have a lot of people ask us because, we did work in comics for years. And we were one of only a handful of people that kind of sort of did webcomics full time, if you take into account the comic itself and all the shows we had to do. That we were able to make that work, which is shocking given the economics of it, but we did it. And, just talk about where things are kind of going now. And Webtoon especially has become the biggest player in the digital comics space, webcomic space. But I don't know if it's been beneficial to creators.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that.
It's only beneficial to certain people.
Right. And it is my opinion that Webtoon coming in with all the funding it had effectively killed off independent webcomic sites.
You better be careful because Webtoon is going to send somebody to contact you like last time, because how dare you have an opinion that they don't like?
Oh, and we're trying to be objective. So, this is going to be kind of a long video. We're going to give some of our anecdotes about the industry and digital comics and all that. But the first thing I wanted to pull up here was, the state of the comic book industry. Obviously, because of COVID, it's not great right now. Now, what people are doing is they're pivoting. We've been saying for years that the direct market was going to probably implode, and it looks like COVID is absolutely speeding that up. In fact, there's numbers out there to show that we effectively had 5 years of damage, compressed into 1 year in the direct market. So now what's going on is the comic book pundits, to show that the comic book industry is fine, they're going out to crowdfunding. They're going out to manga and other graphic novels.
They're trying to roll it all into the numbers. Yes.
Right, and I'm waiting for like digital comics. Well, they are rolling digital comics into that too. So, it's kind of funny to see how everybody's kind of scrambling to prove their point that comics is fine, but it's getting harder and harder for people to actually make a living doing comics. And, one of the early ways to make a living doing comics outside of the system was webcomics. Webcomics, people were actually doing pretty good with webcomics back in the day when the ad rates were there. Because
that was 5 years ago, this article.
Yeah, I know. They were dead. They were dying then. A lot of these people have moved on from webcomics. But back in the day, like 10, 15 years ago, you could put a comic out there on a website. You could put ads on that website. And if you got enough traffic, you would not only, and it's kind of like how YouTube is working now. And I think webcomics were like proto-YouTube. Not only could you make money off the ad revenue, but you'd make money off the merchandise sales.
Right.
And you would take your audience and you could push your audience into, crowdfunding books or whatever.
Well, then we had Project Wonderful back then too, which we'll go into that later, how that died. And that was nice because you could advertise on bigger comics than you, and you could promote your comic that way as well. And you could take money for people advertising on you.
Right. And so there were people that were actually making pretty okay money at webcomics. I know Penny Arcade, they had something on them back in the day. They started as a webcomic. I mean, they do packs and stuff now, but they started as a webcomic. They're talking about how they used to click their own ads on Google.
Oh, yeah. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Because that's kind of how, that was like, I think the first blow against webcomics is that the ad revenue started to drop. There were actually some ad services that refused to advertise on webcomics. Because they said webcomics have a very dodgy...
High cheat rate.
High cheat rate, right?
So there's so many things that there are cheated on webcomics. It's ridiculous.
Right. So it became harder and harder to get good ads on webcomics, which kind of chipped away at it. But really, what chipped away at webcomics, I think more was Webtoon. We'll talk about that, and it's kind of this domino effect. We have print comics people blaming the number of digital comics available legally and illegally for the reason that the print comic industry is declining. And I think there's some truth to that. But then we also have webcomics people blaming Webtoon for effectively making Webtoon the only game in town.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what happened there. So, it's interesting because we want to talk about, like how people can make a living doing comics. And people are doing very well now in indie comics, but they're doing it differently. You always have to, I think, stay on your toes. You can't get too comfortable.
Constantly. I think I said this once on an interview we did, where the thing about comics is, well, you have to look for the next wave, because what would happen was in webcomics, everybody would see one person getting successful, they all try to copy that, they scramble to copy it. But the problem was, by the time they scrambled to copy it, the next wave was coming, and they weren't ready for the next wave. People that were successful were always looking for the next wave to catch that one and not be so focused on the past wave. And that's what would happen with webcomics.
Yeah, there were just way too many webcomics. Way too many webcomics. And they ranged the gamut from being okay. There were some that were very, very good. And there were some that were, pretty okay. And there were some that were, not good. There were, because pretty much anybody that could host a website could throw a comic up. And it became harder and harder to find these comics as everybody popped up their own little sites, and then everybody sort of went off into little collectives. You had Keenspot was the biggest collective for a while.
Drunk Duck and
Hiveworks.
We have some stories about Hiveworks,
which is still around, but
is it still around?
Barely. Yeah.
I just hate them. I'll tell you, not the people making comics on it.
No.
The people behind it, and I'll talk about that in a bit. They are a bunch of tollbags.
Yeah, I think Hiveworks was kind of the first blow against, because what happened was with Hiveworks, they came on the scene, 2012?
I don't know. They're the guy that was in charge. It was an arrogant little
they were
weed, and I couldn't stand him.
Very aggressively trying to recruit people, because all these people had their own independent websites, and so what they were trying to do is aggressively create or curate comics that had audiences already. Unfortunately, I will tell you that some of the tactics used to get people to join up with their collective, I think were pretty scuzzy. In fact, we ran into issues with them. They basically tried to, if you wouldn't join them, you were put on the shit list.
Apparently there were meetings dedicated to us because we were a problem. They were also behind, I think, Project Wonderful. The issue of Project Wonderful, because Project Wonderful was this great site that you could use to advertise on their sites. The problem was, there was a trend that started by a certain person over at Hiveworks where you would deliberately run somebody up. Like before, it was pretty much, someone outbid you, they outbid you, and you'd wait till they ran out, and then you get back up again. Most people respected that. And then they started this thing, what they call that, where they would deliberately, you might have that your high bid was $800, and they'd run you to $799 to try to run you out of money to squat on it.
Oh, it was like shill bidding. Yeah. There was. So the only link that a lot of these websites had anymore, because there were thousands and thousands and thousands of webcomics, was Project Wonderful, and it was the ad box. So it became harder and harder to find high traffic sites. So Hiveworks would come in, find the high traffic sites to divert more traffic to their site, but they would do so by a lot of times running people out of money. It turns
out it was against the rules of Project Wonderful. And then we ended up talking to people in charge over there and found out, we traced it back to a certain individual, and that who happened to be tied to that company. But anyway, they did try to get us 2 or 3 times, and we told them no. It led to a lot of underhanded stuff, a lot of questionable behavior, and from where we're sitting, and everything else. But it wasn't at the people that have their comics on there. It was the person who's running it.
Yeah, and I'm the marketing guy. I think I
just love when he ran into you and didn't realize you were you. This person went out of their way to try to be as holy as they could towards us. And we were at a convention once, and Kneon was sitting there talking to one of their comic people, because we were to the panel with them, and they were just chatting away.
And they were nice.
They were nice. We were nice. We had no problem with them. It wasn't their fault.
No.
And he didn't have his name badge turned frontwards. So when he comes up to the table, he didn't realize that Kneon was Kneon. And he's just oh, you're not so-and-so that should have been there. And he's like, no, I'm not. And he stands up, and he's towering over this guy. And he's like, hi, I'm, and he says his name from Shadowbinders. And the guy went pure white, about pissed his pants, and then suddenly had to leave. It was funny.
Yeah. So that was our Hiveworks. Anyway, Hiveworks sort of collected the last of the webcomics that were worth anything into one place. But then the problem with that is you're all in one place, so it's very easy to snuff you out.
So that started that, and they killed Project Wonderful.
Yes.
By, the stuff that went down with that and how it was kind of cheated. That kind of led to the end of the Project Wonderful, I believe, and in my opinion. And then Webtoons showed up. But before Webtoons, it was
Tapastic.
Tapastic.
Or I think it's Tapas now.
It's Tapas, yeah.
Yeah, but they all came on the scene about, I want to say like 2013, 2014. And first it was Tapas or Tapastic or whatever it is now. And they were okay. I mean...
But they were trying to get people to come over by like paying all this money to put your comic on their site.
Yeah.
With the venture capital. They started it first. Then Webtoon came in.
Then Webtoon came in. Now Webtoon, people, and we told people, we said, when Webtoon comes in, this is going to be a game changer because in Korea... Webtoon was synonymous with webcomics. And I'm like, this is the beginning of the end of independent webcomics creators. Like, you're going to have to basically get on Webtoon and hope for the best, or you have no chance of getting an audience. And people laughed at us. They said, you're full of shit, kind of like they do now.
Yeah, like they always do.
And we said, no, you don't understand. They pretty much own webcomics, and they're going to come over here, and they're going to own it too. And that's basically what happened. Now, it took a few years, but they came over, and they sweet-talked a lot of people into bringing their webcomics over, because at that point, there was no financial incentive to even run your own site anymore.
Well, yeah, and the fact is, the matter is, it's true. People aren't going to like it, but it's the truth. The truth of the matter was a lot of people, there weren't a lot of people who were making money.
Yeah.
So for many people, they didn't care about the money. They figured it would come later. They just wanted the views, and they wanted a platform that they'd have better exposure at, because making money wasn't a priority because they weren't making it anyway. And Webtoons provided that. There was no money, but they had one hell of a platform that you could, hopefully get more eyeballs to, better than your own website. So for those people, the upvotes was the currency.
Yeah, so it became sort of like YouTube. That was kind of the plan. Now, the thing is, though, is that they brought a lot of people in. They pretty much either mirrored their comics here, or they just moved their comics over entirely to Webtoon, with the promise of eventually, maybe possibly, getting paid something.
Or getting picked up as one of the featured.
Right, which that was the goal for a while. And I know some people that actually got featured, and they were, basically paying artists to do exclusive content. And some of those people have left. I don't know exactly what happened, but I get the vibe they didn't leave on very good terms. And then once the site got to a certain size, again, personal opinion, built on the backs of so many hopefuls. Once it got to a certain size, then they started going out and bringing in like Marvel Comics people.
Which they did do.
Yeah, DC Comics people.
And then when they were bringing the views, they were hiding their views. Remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
Because they weren't bringing the views in, as some comics like ours or other people's were getting much more views than they were. And so then those views went hidden.
Yeah, now I want to be clear. I'm not, the purpose of this video isn't to take a shit on Webtoon. I think Webtoon is a good platform, but what I'm trying to do is show you like how the opportunities, the places to cultivate an audience for comics has been narrowed down, where basically Webtoon has become the only game in town. That's always dangerous.
And it's oversaturated.
It's oversaturated. It is. It's been for years. And even now, you look at the stuff that's getting picked up for animation, and it's so weird because they're working with Crunchyroll to do animated versions of some of their Korean series. And Crunchyroll's getting sold. So I don't know what's going to happen.
No, but I'm just saying, it was the people that they brought people over from Korea, and a lot of those are the ones who got promoted and got sent to the deals. But they used people that had webcomics over here to drive up the free, to drive up the views, to drive up the, bring all your fans and your people over here. And then after they had that, they leveraged their people for these deals.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because, you can get a lot of eyeballs, but it doesn't mean there's a lot of money there. And I want to talk about this and how this relates to the mainstream comic book industry and making a living in comics, right? So back in the day, not too long ago, other than, aside from webcomics, if you wanted to make money in comics, you had to sell comics. Like, if you wanted to read comics, you had to buy comics. There weren't free comics out there. Then along came the internet. And it started out, in addition to webcomics, which were usually a totally different thing. They weren't like the mainstream stuff. In addition to webcomics, we had a lot of sites pop up that started putting illegal scans of comics out there. So what kind of happened was we have an entire generation, again, in my opinion, an entire generation of comic book readers who are used to getting as many comics as they want for free.
Well, I think it was the economy, too, because there was a time when the economy took a hit and people didn't have the extra money. So they just switched from paying for comics to reading them for free.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the age, but for the longest time, it was younger people would read them for free because they didn't have the money. And so you were cultivating an audience that were not only freeloaders, they didn't have the money to give you money anyway.
Yeah, we would run into this too. There was definitely a shift. Like we started our comic in like 2009, 2010. And at first it seemed like it was more, I guess, adults. And then as time went on, it seemed like we got, a younger and younger audience. And they were always like, oh, I love your comic, but I don't have any money. I don't have any money because we tried Patreon, we tried all this stuff, to try to, because the ad revenue was starting to drop off. Partially, we went to another webcomic portal, and we had to basically just trust that they were going to give us our fair share of
millions of views, and they'd send you a check for less money than we did on our own.
Yeah,
for way less views.
Kind of like, yeah, guys, nothing personal, but I don't buy it. So we started to kind of see this shift. So when people were asked to start paying for comics directly, that the advertising wasn't supporting anymore, then that's when things kind of fell off. But I mean, you're competing with hundreds of thousands of other comics.
And it's like, and we said this years ago, every day there's more added. And that was years ago when there wasn't that many. There's, oh my gosh, 100 times that now, at least.
Yeah, and now that's not to say that you can't make money. It works kind of like YouTube. But again, Webtoon has kind of set itself up as being the only game in town now. A lot of people, when they decide to do a webcomic, they don't even think about doing it on their own site, because they would have to go build a site, drive traffic to that site somehow, and Project Wonderful doesn't exist anymore. That was the big traffic source.
Yeah, the Project Wonderful made it kind of more fair. Now, you have to go to Webtoons and then, hope that maybe possibly you get big there.
Yeah.
And the plus side is there's a lot of eyeballs, though.
That is true. So, I think it's easier now in some ways, because even when we mirrored our comic on Webtoon back in the day, it was still kind of starting out. And even though there wasn't as much competition, there weren't as many people using it either. So it's kind of like YouTube in that regard, where you've got, the early adopters, and some of them did well, some of them just kind of, fell off or whatever. But now, even if you go onto YouTube, there are so many more people watching YouTube that you do actually have, if your content's decent, you actually have a chance of hopefully, picking up some followers. But, what's interesting about this, talking about the money, is so many people were trying to make money off of Webtoon, and they promise you some money. Now, they keep changing this. When we were on there, they had a thing going. This shows you how long ago it was. This is back in 2016.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, they were doing this Patreon team up, and they were actually, based on your views, because they were trying to drive traffic and get people to bring their stuff over. But, 50,000 page views a month, you get $1,000 from Webtoons. And we got, I want to say we were getting more page views than that, but we didn't have the subscribers, so we wound up getting like half of that, I think. But then they stopped doing that.
Right.
So once they got a bunch of people in, they got the traffic up, they stopped doing it, and now they've got these other programs where they've got an ad revenue sharing system, but you only get 50% of their banner ads.
Yeah, but that's not unusual.
No, that's pretty good. I mean, YouTube, I think it's about the same, or it's like 30. I want to say it's like 70-30 split. But those are video ads, and they pay more.
Way more.
But they're also doing this Webtoon Canvas creator program, and I don't know if they're still doing this or not. January 1st. So it basically shows you how much money you can actually make. So you can make some money. I'm sure people are making some money at it, but that's still not a lot of money.
Yeah, it's really not.
Compared to what webcomics were making back in the day when the ad rates were good. Okay, and Penny Arcade basically built their whole business on that. But everybody keeps, like you were saying, people always look at successes and they keep looking at Penny Arcade. Well, 20 years ago, Penny Arcade...
There was no competition.
There was no competition.
That's just it. And the thing is now, there's so much competition. Yeah, people are still going to make some money. But that doesn't mean that you are. And it always amused me when there's people who get like hardly any views and they're talking about how, oh, well, they're making money off of me. Yes and no. They are making money off of people like you and a bunch of you together. But you specifically, they're probably not making that much money off, and it probably costs more to host your comic than they're making from you. Where they make their money are the big creators.
Yeah, and there are some, and I don't want to say that there isn't. There,
oh no, there totally is.
Yeah, you look at like Laura Olympus, and she kind of blasted through the ranks and is doing well. But just know it's like, again, you're talking like she would be like the PewDiePie of the platform. Mm-hmm. Not everybody who starts is going to be PewDiePie. But I was trying to get a feel for like what people are actually making on Webtoons, and I can't find any hard numbers. I know back in the day, their exclusive comics were getting like $2,000 to $4,000 a month.
But they were paying it.
They were paying it. So it didn't even matter if you brought the views. Some people, they had a deal, they were from like Marvel or DC and they were giving them that. Mm-hmm. But you break that down even for the amount of time, it's like, it's really not a lot of money. Mm-mm. So then you have to look at like, are people going to buy the comics? And I've seen people do, Kickstarters and crowdfunding for their comics, but it doesn't seem like the Webtoon audience buys much.
No. Well, that's what we found with webcomics in general. We had a lot of people who just wanted more free. And if something happened and we couldn't do a page because, like we were sick or we had to, pay our bills or do something else, we get a lot of complaints. But now Webtoons people, I will say, were a lot more, I don't know how to word it. They were a lot more receptive. They were a lot more invested. They were a lot kinder back then about that kind of stuff, people on our website.
Yeah, so that was a change too, and that was, I'll tell you the truth, and this came up as we're looking at our options to bring our webcomic back in some form. Is I can tell you my own personal experience was because of everybody expecting everything for free and the amount of work that was involved, because we were cranking out like 3 full color pages a week on top of a day job. I got very bitter because we constantly had people just like, if we're like, hey guys, I'm sick and I'm, over 30 and I got family obligations and I can't give you any free stuff, they would get freaking vicious.
Right. And we're not talking like some of the things you see here with like infinite scroll and you might have like 5 panels of headshots. We had like huge backgrounds and everything
just
else.
Just like a print
It would take you, like 12, 15 hours a page?
And I would do that 2 to 3 times a week on top of a day job. Mm-hmm. And I missed my kids growing up for this comic. And
and then people were just like total assholes about it.
They were horrible.
And it's like we really appreciated the people that were like the readers that understood, because it's like, life happens and we can't, but it's whole like, you're here to give me my free. And that's what happened. And I'm sure a lot of people in Webtoons run into that too. Now, I did find Webtoons to be more accepting and more kind about it. But yeah, they get in the habit of you better update. Where's my free?
Yeah, we literally would have people tell us, and they would tell us in the comments, they're like, well, you didn't update, so basically you're lazy because you didn't give me a free comic. You didn't work your ass off for a free comic. So then we got to the point where it's like, fine, we'll rattle the cup. We did Patreon. We're like, we'll rattle the cup, and it would be crickets. That would actually chase them away.
No, it was always funny because they'd be like, well, I only can give like 3 people and you're not my favorite, so I'm not giving to you. They actually would tell us that. Yeah,
so my perspective on, and I was a huge advocate for webcomics for a number of years. And
actually, you were one of the ones that we're not going to say who it was, but one of the people that I considered a pioneer of webcomics. It's funny because actually they didn't want to do webcomics. Kneon talked them into it. Kneon put their comic up for them and everything else and made sure it got put out there. And then they go around like, I'm a pioneer, and they didn't even want to do it.
Yeah, I was like, even before we did, and we, worked on multiple webcomics even before the one that finally stuck, but I was kind of in the background doing stuff the whole time, Mm-hmm. And from the beginning. So I saw all of this go down. I knew the internet was going to be instrumental to comics, going forward, but it's just the monetization was always the issue. But I actually became and they used to bring us in to conventions to talk about webcomics mm-hmm. and digital comics and stuff all the time.
Some of the big platforms brought us in several times when they wanted information on how to make it work or they wanted new ideas. They pay us to come in and work with them to come up with ideas and things. Yeah,
so, it got to a point where I was a big cheerleader for webcomics, and the change in the audience for me was just like, I can't do this anymore, because it was just like, at least on, like, we get some bullshit on YouTube, but I guess the difference is at least YouTube, one, the time sync isn't as hard, mm-hmm. Because we're just kind of talking about stuff or whatever, and 2, the ad rates are actually pretty good. I can put up with bullshit from people for that. But when I literally missed my children growing up,
we almost lost our house.
Chasing indie comics, chasing webcomics, only to have people turn around and be like, you're lazy. We don't, other people give us more comics. I'm like, yeah, they don't have the obligations we have. I got really bitter, I did. And,
I was always mad because I really liked our comic, and I'm still upset we haven't finished it. And it's been kind of on hold for a while because it meant a lot more to me than you, I think.
No, it meant a lot. It meant a lot. It meant a lot to me too. Cause some of the concepts actually, we kind of merged concepts together, and, we had for years. I mean, going back decades, and the audience is different. And I think that's a huge difference between webcomics people and even what you're seeing now on YouTube with crowdfunding and the whole CG thing and all of that. Is there is a difference in the audience. I'm not saying one audience is better than another. I'm saying one audience is more mature and actually understands that you have to pay for things versus, and I think you're better off in some ways having, 1,000 people that will support you financially versus having 100,000 people that just want more free stuff.
Right. Well, that was the thing they were saying for years. What is it like?
Oh, that 1,000 true fan.
Yeah.
Well,
that sounds kind of like that, which
Yeah, I'm kind of on that one because I'm like, well, if you only have 1,000 fans and you lose 5, then you take a huge hit.
Right. But the point is, it's like, can you do webcomics? Yes. Webtoons is out there. It's on one hand, it's really great because there's a lot of people looking for comics. You can hit a big audience in one fell swoop. But it's going to be really hard to get attention because there's so many really good comics that are hitting people in one fell swoop.
Yeah. Now, again, to kind of go back to like how this ties in the mainstream, the fact that I do think it has hurt the mainstream industry in some ways, not Webtoons, but just, digital comics in general. Seeing a lot of, stuff now that the mainstream is trying to get in on Webtoons. Like,
we already know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Archie's trying to like, hey, kids, we got Archie comics. We're going to put Archie on Webtoon. I don't think that's going to work very well for them because the style of comic is completely different.
Yeah, the one thing people liked about webcomics were they were very different from a lot of the superhero and the comics you normally see in comic books. So that's what was great about webcomics was because it gave you some different things. And so I don't know if webcomics is going to, with an established brand, is going to cross over well. They
try that. Now they had I remember they had Star Wars on there for a while, but they actually took I think the manhwa and just converted it to Webtoon. It was actually okay. But it doesn't seem like these kinds of comics. They did before. Image had some stuff on there. I remember they had some superhero comics from the 90s, and they didn't do very well. Because, again, those audiences are different.
Well, the mainstream has no problem with letting other people do all the work to build something and then try to sweep it and take control of it.
That's exactly it.
They did that many times.
And, as the comic book industry, especially since they're getting pinched over in the direct market, now they're all trying to come over into crowdfunding. They're all trying to come over into digital comics again. They're, look at DC, they're trying to get into the graphic novels and the manga and all of that. But, it's weird that in the last year or two, especially, Webtoon has been pushing hard in the comics media. I mean, so what kind of set me off on this thing today was that comic book resources, of course, they're hard up for news now. They're going to be really hard up for news because there's not a whole lot of news. But they keep doing articles on Webtoons. And they did an article on Scoob and Shag, which is like a bootleg Scooby-Doo Tumblr comic.
But now he just brought light to it. It's probably to get pulled down.
Oh, I don't know. I was surprised it can survive. But, I mean, it's not bad. I thumbed through it a little bit and whatever. It's considered parody maybe, so maybe that's how they can keep it up. But, 36 million views.
Oh, once upon a time we had ridiculous amount of subscribers and views on ours too, but we took it down, didn't we?
Yeah, we took it down.
So,
so it's interesting though that they keep pushing, and that's what the end goal of this is to kind of push Webtoon into the mainstream, and then over here in the U.S., I mean Korea, it's already a big deal. They got the anime series coming out, and that was always the plan, and that's what we told people 5 or 6 years ago. You don't understand. They come over here, it's going to be the only game in town.
Right.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Yes, it is.
And that's exactly what happened.
That's exactly what happened. So, again, just to reiterate, not slamming on the platform.
No, there's a lot of good comics over there.
Yeah, there are.
But just understand that unless people get a lot of hits, they aren't getting paid.
No, they're not getting paid much. But if you just want exposure, and a lot of people, I don't know why, but they're just yeah, we're okay with exposure. Me personally, we got 2 kids and a mortgage, so I like to get paid for my time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we're going to wrap this one up.
Yep.
Okay, so please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.